the September 30th Selectmen's meeting.
So moved. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Are there any board and committee reports? Seeing none, are there any citizens' concerns? Seeing none, we have no public hearing before us tonight. So that brings us to our town administrator's report, Tracy.
Yep, I previously sent you the draft special town meeting warrant for your review. I handed out one tonight. It was approved by town council. The language was revised, and that should be the final copy for signing. We are scheduled we have to have it posted on the 7th, and we're scheduled to meet with the Finance Committee and the Capital Planning Committee on the 14th. They will be giving you their votes, and then the board would be asked on that evening to take their votes on the articles that have been presented.
Maybe we'll have a motion and then we'll discuss it. Is there a motion to accept the warrant?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Do we have discussion on what you guys read? Did you see anything there, Damon or David or anyone?
Well, Tracy, that email I'd sent to you about that, the one warrant article, you'd said it would be in the pamphlet from the Finance Committee or whatever, but can we find out a little bit about that ahead of time?
Sure. There is, Mass General Law provides for an allowance.
Because I'm not sure what
Article, let's see.
which article, Dave?
Article 8, that asks to see if the town will vote to cease assessing the excise tax imposed under Mass General Law, Chapter 59, Section 8A, on certain animals, machinery, and equipment owned by individuals and non-corporate entities principally engaged in agriculture. We are allowed to, actually, we are supposed to be taxing farm animals, farm machinery, and the likes. We don't do that here, or we haven't done that, but in order to kind of comply with this section of the general law, in order to not tax them, we're supposed to have a vote from town meeting allowing us not to tax them. So we're kind of doing some housekeeping, because we're not currently taxing them and we don't intend to start taxing them. But we want to have this vote on record showing that it was the will of the town to not do that. Yeah.
Did we have to vote to start taxing, or, I mean?
No, you're required to tax unless you have this vote to
Okay, yeah,
cease.
because I tried reading the Mass General Law, and it was really confusing.
It's very confusing. That's why we had council review it, yep,
Learn something every day.
yeah. And I also wanted to bring your attention to the fact that upon the recommendation of both town councils, Lisa Mead and Ginny Creamer, the article that we had talked about from Fish and Wildlife initially is not appearing on this final warrant. If you want it included, we can certainly put it back on, but it was their recommendation that the petition only appear. They still weren't understanding why the town would step into this issue, where the precedent has already been set in another community by this very petition language. And they said, if in the future we want to convey to Fish and Wildlife, if that's even possible, and they weren't ready to say that yet, but if we wanted to convey those lots to Fish and Wildlife, we could do that at any future date. One does not really, shouldn't be contingent upon the other issue. So that was their recommendation.
I mean, the presentation by Anne seemed to make it seem that in order for Fish and Wildlife to give up that land, they had to get something in return. So that, town council says that that's not an accurate.
No, if this petition was voted affirmatively through the legislature, then they would have to give that
I
up.
understood it the same way
Yep.
you did also.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And I think, Damon's, where some of the problem was, and correct me if I'm wrong, that land was already like Chapter 97 land,
Right.
and we really couldn't allow that to occur without going to the legislature ourselves. So, and so it was kind of a moot point.
That's right.
Can I just ask, is it the sense from town council that this going to the legislature is gonna be sort of a done deal, or did they just?
You know, you never know, but the precedent was set, I believe, in the town of Georgetown. This has already occurred.
But there's probably gonna be a lot of pushback.
I would
Oh,
think
I'm
that,
sure,
yeah.
I'm sure.
So that,
I thought that's what that was my interpretation of what.
yeah.
Anne was trying to do.
Yeah.
There could be some implications for how Fish and Wildlife receives their funding because they use some federal funds. I'm not so sure that there's as much exposure as had been thought there might be. But, I mean, that's, certainly the legislature in all their wisdom probably isn't gonna make it so Fish and Wildlife can't receive their funding either, you know, so.
Mm.
That's what I have for intel anyway, so.
Now, Article 9, we still don't have the language?
It's in the copy that I handed out.
Yeah, so this
Oh.
copy here.
Yep.
Okay, the separate, the one
Yep.
that wasn't part of the agenda.
And what Article 9 is trying to accomplish is our personnel bylaw, the way it's written currently, with the vacation time that an employee accrues, they have to use it by June 30th, or they lose it. So what typically happens is we get to around the third or fourth week in June, and everyone leaves the building, which isn't conducive to conducting business. So what this will allow for is allow them to carry it over, and they have to use it within 90 days of the end of the fiscal year. So it just gives them that window.
Yeah.
And how does this intersect with the ballot question that's gonna be on the November 4th about sick leave statewide, or?
It doesn't.
Entirely?
It doesn't. This is
I
just,
wasn't sure that I didn't wanna have something on the warrant that might then be in conflict with something that's passed in mass state law.
I don't
The
believe it.
ballot question is strictly sick leave, and this is strictly.
This is
vacation.
vacation, yeah.
Okay.
And I think too, I mean, it's pretty common in other enterprises to let employees carry over, you know, vacation time to some extent, and it varies how much, but.
There weren't, and just so you know, we did an analysis to see, there weren't a significant number of employees that would carry over big balances. It's, 3 or 4 days. It's not, like you've got 2 weeks or 3 weeks. So, but it can be a bit of a problem when everyone's gone at once, so.
And procedurally, we're gonna meet with FinCom to talk about all these things, and so we're gonna discuss these a second go-around?
That's when we'll be discussing them all. The Finance Committee will take votes and will provide you with rationales on why they approved or disapproved any of these articles. Capital Planning Committee will be available to advise you on whether or not they thought the capital projects should move forward. And then that evening, the board would also be called upon to take their votes, which will all be included in the Finance Committee booklet that's handed out at town meetings, so, or prior to town meeting.
Everyone else set? Any other discussion? Go ahead, Dean.
What is the 15,000 for the Grange steps is the brick front steps?
Precast concrete.
So it's gonna be put in as precast concrete.
That was what the quote was.
What is the lease language currently? Because at one point, the town was doing repairs on the outside and they were doing stuff on the inside, but I thought there was gonna be a new lease and I've not seen or read that. I don't know if the lease has changed for them.
I'd have to pull it out to see what the exact language is. I know it was, nothing changed from the original lease that I'm aware of. When we executed, I think we executed a second lease, and it was the exact same language as the first one.
Can you remember how long that is?
I want to say 3 years, but I'll have to confirm that.
Okay, so
But
we're
we did
still-
have the ability to get out of the lease as well.
I just wasn't sure
I can
where
get you a
our
copy.
responsibilities and obligations, because at one point, when I first read the first lease, some of the language made it seem like if we didn't do a repair, they could challenge us and take us to court, which they wouldn't do, but, you know, I know all of them, none of them are that foolish, but,
It is our building. We can
Yeah.
have- The second thing is that is not gonna cost exactly, it's up to 15, or not to exceed 15,000, okay? So it could come in a lot less than that on a bid.
yeah.
Right, right.
No, I just wasn't sure where, some leases have obligations of repair on the leasee versus, and so I wanted to know where we were legally in regards to that, our responsibility. Because I know in the past they've tried to fundraise for stuff and, you know, why approve money if they haven't gotten a grant to do it?
Yeah.
Things like that.
I've also been advised by the building inspector that if this does not get approved, he is going to have to shut that building down. He's been holding off on doing that for quite some time.
Ow.
Yeah, so we kind of keep putting it off, and he said, you know, we can't do that any longer.
Yep.
We've got to bring those stairs into compliance. They're dangerous at this point.
I think they've been dangerous for about 10 years.
Probably. Yeah, yeah.
I've only been paying attention to them for about 10 years.
Yep.
So,
All set?
yeah, I think that's,
Are we ready to vote? We need a vote to sign,
On each
you know,
one,
or just sign it?
Yeah, you can vote to,
Why don't we vote to sign it and then we're okay, how's
Yep.
that? We have the motion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Second under new business, and Damon, don't let me forget to read this, okay? There, yep,
right
I get
down.
through this. Under new business, we also have, we're urged to review the new forms for the one-day liquor license and entertainment licenses. I know I've reviewed them. I don't know if everyone else has had a chance to review them. If there's anything you'd like to discuss kind of quickly, or maybe have a little time. How quickly are these going to be in operation?
Sam will be available at the next meeting. What he's looking for is for you to take a look at them and then give me any feedback that you want, additional things included, or anything you think is missing from the forms. And he can revise them, and we can have them before you for your final approval.
So unless there's anything that anyone wants to discuss right now, in relevant to that licensing process, we can probably wait a little bit and talk about it with Sam at next meeting.
That's
And
My
what's-
only comment on the whole thing was a completed workman's compensation affidavit, and I was curious as to why we were poking our nose into the business's workman's comp, but I'm told it's state law.
What Susan did was, she took the law and she tried to go line by line and make sure that this
Yeah.
was reflective of everything we're required to gather. She also looked at a few other communities to see what they had, and, you know, pirated a little bit was from theirs as well. But I can certainly ask her that.
Okay.
So it's probably not to our advantage to start to pick and choose what we want.
I think what Sam said exactly was, if there's anything you'd like to add to the document. But,
All right, so moving on, we're going to sign, so we probably would take a motion for the state election on November 4th, 2014. Is there anything else that we have to do besides that, that's protocol, Tracy?
Nope.
So I'd take from someone on the board a motion to sign the state election for November.
Yeah, motion to sign.
All right, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
What happens if we don't sign it?
I don't know, good question. We do everything else in Newbury, want to try it?
Why not? I love it.
We have an article on it.
Yeah, CPA.
Yeah, that's right, too, good Kathy. Request for a banner.
That's me.
Oh, then we'll let you come up and speak about it. You even have it with you.
Got it with her. I thought they were plans at first.
Thank you for, esteeming us at short notice.
Oh, I like it. All right.
This is what we run it 2 years in a row. We've always hung the banners around the 3 towns in different spots, but this year it was suggested that we hang one on the back of the, I think it's the upper green, the
Yep.
chain fence where the kids play ball, so when you come up the island, you'll be able to see it. So I'm hoping to hang one there and then put one over on the rec fields on stakes, stake it in there. We're gonna put one as you come out of Triton, on the field there. And then there's gonna be one at all 3 elementary schools. And one in Newburyport at the North.
Kathy, we okay with everything so far? Yep.
Motion to approve.
Motion,
And it'll come down the day after. Well,
26.
sometime this week or next week. It'll
That's the
come down
biggie.
The day after, yeah, but not as
Yep.
just litter.
We're not gonna be, we already have someone putting a banner up for the domestic violence walk. That won't be, there's not plenty of space
I
for
think
those,
there's plenty
right?
of room.
Just didn't wanna start some war between 2 good things in town.
Actually, David, I wanted to, after I'll contact you, talk about you possibly, acting in an advisory role, to mentoring the kids there. Do you have a background?
Yes, sounds good.
Thank you very much.
So we have a motion, can we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. You got it, kid?
Thank you.
Yep,
Aye.
thank you.
Have a great
Thanks.
Once again, I'm gonna look to Tracy, but I don't know, do you folks have this in front of you? To address to Paul Thistlewood, and it is from Marine Fisheries. I'm gonna read it. And Kathy, if this wasn't, I think we could actually be involved in voting to accept some of this language, because I believe if it's the same stuff, it's a contract, or somewhat of a contract. But we would have to put that on the agenda, but we're gonna talk about it tonight, or would we have to?
It doesn't require,
You've looked at this totally?
I've looked through that, I signed off on it. I don't know that it requires a formal vote of the board, but definitely you wanna
All right, now I
announce
haven't
it.
seen this letter, but this is the green crab stuff.
Yes.
All right, guys, this is some of the things that I've alerted the board to that are starting to become a tremendous problem in our estuary system, and this is the hyperabundance of green crab. Paul went down, I think, with another fish commissioner or another fisherman to, or clamor to Marine Fisheries when this first came out. This is going to, and don't hold me to the exact, but I believe it is going to the people on this part of the Great Marsh, meaning Newbury, Raleigh, Ipswich, and Essex. This was a line item for the legislature. It's probably 143,000 or 137,000, but there's funding in this for each town to participate in a trapping program for lessening the numbers of green crab. It'll last until November, and then it'll pick up again. I haven't read this totally, but I'm talking about, we're actually doing part of the science, and Salem State is involved in looking for a commercial component to this. So this has been offered by the legislature to each town to participate in this, and then I'll read the letter. And then, like Tracy said, some of the information came to her. This was from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Division of Marine Fisheries, and it was addressed to Mr. Paul Thistlewood, our fish commissioner, and Kathy had passed it on to me so that we could notify the board. It was September 22nd, 2014. Dear Mr. Thistlewood, the Massachusetts Division of Marine Fisheries is administering funds for the Great Marsh Crab Depletion Program for FY 2015. The purpose of this program is to capture and remove European green crabs from the coastal marine estuary waters within the Great Marsh ecosystem to improve shellfish, eelgrass, and other fishery resources. In our estuaries right now, for the folks that were out there, like especially of my age frame or David's or even Chuck's, I mean, we used to be loaded with blue mussels in our estuary. I have yet to find a blue mussel in our estuary. The
Wow.
green crabs go after blue mussels first, and there's not one left. There's striped mussels left, we have no blue mussels. And that's the beginning of what people say is that trophic cascade that we all talk about. It'll be the snails, it'll be the sea worms, it'll be the sea clams, it'll be the soft shell clams. Maine has engendered a tremendous problem with green crabs, as you might read. Maine and Canada, the provinces of Canada. Our green crab came from Europe via New Jersey, and it was southern Europe. And our green crab kind of emanated upwards from New Jersey to us, and they're less tolerant to cold water, which seems, winter waters, which seems the only thing that depletes them, other than trapping, and they're not quite as aggressive. The crabs in Maine came via northern Europe, and they came in through Greenland. They're very tolerant to cold. They're very vigorous, and they're very aggressive, and they're moving down the coast. So they've decimated, even if you read, what's the Maine magazine, or
Yankee?
Yep, Yankee magazine, and actually the Maine they're all talking about losing their shellfishing in Maine, and Canada went through it about a year before. So we're starting to try to step out ahead of it and at least establish the ability to hopefully wish for a heavy winter again, a cold winter. I might have mentioned this before, but during the Hercules storm, when we had all that high wind and high waters and cold weather, if you walked down on Plum Island, I think Dougie has pictures of it, if you walked on Plum Island the day after, the thatch rack from the jetties all the way down to the refuge was just all dead green crab. There was just thousands. So there's a hyperabundance, there's loads of these guys. If we set a green crab trap, which is as big as that end of the table, we'll come up with anywhere from 200 to 600 crab in one night in a trap. So anyway, this is a depletion program. All the towns will participate in this. The Great Marsh Revitalization Task Force, Peter Phippen, myself, and Alyssa Novak, who's a PhD from UNH, are gonna be working on trying to really establish the science of just trying to decide where the concentrations are and how much and how large the hyperabundance is. And Salem State is going to try to find someone that would like to eat these crabs, so we can, put together a commercial component for them. Tracy, on the back side of this, the stuff that you have read, what do we need to know? This is gonna go to a clamor, or a bunch of clamors, and they're gonna be did you get a chance to read it?
I met with Paul Thistlewood
Yep.
today.
Good.
They're going to, the fish commissioners have agreed to administer the program.
Marine Fisheries buying the traps?
Yes, Marine Fisheries are buying the
It's a
traps.
no-brainer, yep.
I want to say it's a little bit more than 15,000
It is,
that's
it's,
available.
15.6.
15.6, and they would ask, those having the proper licenses who would be interested and
And I'll just read
get
a
them in
little
touch with the
more.
right people.
In section 3, it says, payments not to exceed 100% of operational costs of $15,600 shall be made by the Commonwealth upon the receipt of proper invoices as provided above for the following service. Payout to harvesters for green crabs landed at a standardized rate of 40 cents a pound of green crabs landed within the Great Marsh. Supplies necessary and reasonable for operation of the program and reimbursement of green crab disposal as required is further detailed in section 4. So it's a nice document. Hopefully it works, and hopefully we have a cold winter on top of this so we can get some of the numbers of these crabs down. So that's that.
Jeff, if we get a cold winter, then we'll get the Maine crabs down here.
Yeah.
You know what, no matter what, we're eventually gonna have a meeting of the two. I imagine might take a decade. And it seems like that crab, because of its aggressiveness, will subdue the crab that we have in place. But up until that time, we don't want to even reduce any of the stocks that we have now. We're lucky, we're not, I mean, it's not that we're lucky, but Newbury seems to collect a lot of spat. They seem to collect a lot of seed. You start to get down into Essex and some of those places, because of its shallowness, you know, it's a different type of estuary. And it's also, it takes water out at a different speed. It has a lot of ripples in the sand, and they don't capture a lot of seed. So when they have aggressive crabs and it starts to impede their shellfishing, it's a lot harder for their stocks to bounce back, yeah. So, but I mean, this is kind of fascinating. It's all over the place. If you go home and just look it up on your computer, it's all over the place. I mean, there's a lot of information now available on green crab.
And so, within this program, the green crab that's caught is measured and then they're killed and dumped, or are they sent to Salem
Well,
State?
that's, some of that will all occur too. Some of that will occur from us, some of that will occur from the clammers. But like it says here, there'll be a reimbursement rate for disposal, and I don't know if it's totally worked out yet. There's gonna be a truck park someplace that's gonna take the crab to maybe Ipswich to the, what do they call that place down there, Dave? The composting,
Yep.
down there near the
Okay.
windmills. Are they
They
gonna
have
have
to be in
someplace?
special bags for the compost. I do have a burlap bag that
Are
one
they
of
the white ones or burlap?
the burlap, yeah,
Brown.
yeah, they decompose just as fast, I guess, and,
Burlap.
yeah.
Let me tell you something about these guys.
It's a shame there's nothing you can do with them.
There will be someday, I hope. These guys are so
Cat food,
tough.
something. I mean,
They're so tough that supposedly they can be out of salt water for 3 months. People talk about them overwintering in a frozen bilge in the boats. These guys are, you know, and the other thing, just, I'll bring you up to speed on one more thing, and it's part of what we're involved in. It's starting to be available for information on the internet too, especially in Essex and also in our estuary. We're starting to, it's called calving off, I call it sloughing off. We always thought it had to do with boat wakes. We're losing a lot of our marsh
Yeah.
falling in. And now, like when you get down there, Damon, and you really look again, you're gonna see it's honeycombed with little holes.
From the crabs.
And it's really funny now. And we're working with scientists from Maine to New Jersey, and no one right now is saying it's done, the holes are made by green crabs. Because green crabs' biology, when they're on a flat surface, they push back in with their feet to burrow.
Mhm.
But in part of what we're gonna do this winter is we're going down to my duck camp, and we're gonna set up GoPros and cameras to watch these guys during the night and everything, when they actually burrow.
Mhm.
So we don't know when the burrowing occurs. We believe it is in the winter, we believe it is preparing for winter. But if you go down to Essex especially, I don't know if it's because they have a lower marsh down there, it's a very ultraflora marsh, it's not a high marsh platform, a lot of it's lower marsh. I don't know if the substrate is different, but they are inundated with holes throughout their whole estuary and the marsh bankings. And when you walk on the top of them, you can feel the whole thing start to give because it's holes. It's all honeycomb holes, so. But anyway, Bruce was tremendously helpful in this. And Brad Hill and the legislature moved forward because that is part of our, you know, our heritage, and the shellfishing is a very important component of the state's economy. So anyway, I'm glad that was done. Chuck, thanks for doing that. Tracy, I'm glad you got the information. And Kathy, thanks for giving this to me. Anything else? Any questions before we go on? Communications? Essex Natural Heritage invitation. I think I've seen this somewhere. All right. It is addressed to me. Jeffrey H. Walker, Chair. Dear Chairman Walker, on behalf of the congressionally designated Essex Natural Heritage Commission, I cordially invite you to participate or provide a brief welcome for the town of Newbury at our annual fall meeting on Thursday, October 23rd at the, how do you pronounce that, Whiston Bragdon Arena at Governor's Academy. Note your welcome would occur at the start of the business day. So I guess they're gonna do their annual business meeting at Governor Dummer, and they would like one of the selectmen to go over and welcome them to Newbury. I will do, I'll get a hold of Bill Steelman. Okay. Any meeting updates? Executive session, seeing none, this will be a very quick meeting.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes?
can I finish my report?
Did I cut you
Oh.
off?
I know you're anxious, but brief. I just wanted to let you know that on September 24th, I had the opportunity to meet with the Newburyport Water Sewer Commission, in which they did vote to approve our connection pending a letter from our Board of Health regarding our lack of a reserve septic system field. So that's, I'm gonna be working with them. Deb Rogers has already written the letter, but they haven't met yet. So when the board meets, they'll sign it. I'll get that back to them, and we'll have the appropriate approvals in place.
This is for town hall.
This is for this building right here, yep, yep. And I also wanted to request that the board would vote to declare the 1995 Parker Cuddy Cabin Model 2310 with a 225 horsepower Johnson Ocean Pro outboard, a Raymarine model E120 chart plotter, and an Easy Loader tandem axle trailer. If you could declare that surplus so we can either sell it outright or trade it in for the boat that was voted at the last annual town meeting.
Motion to declare surplus.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
One of the cruises was supposed to come up too pretty quick for auction.
I don't have that
Okay.
information tonight. I'll find
Okay.
out from the chief.
Somebody asked me
Usually
about it
when the
other
new
day.
one comes, then I bring the
Okay.
other one before you, yeah.
All right.
And I also have a letter addressed to Secretary Davy for you to sign, requesting his assistance in securing the funding for the emergency access road on Plum Island. It's a grant for about $120,000. We've been talking about it for
Yes, we
at
have.
least the last 4 years since I've been here, but funding has always
Longer than
been
that.
the issue. Representative Mira and Senator Tar have worked it into the transportation bond bill. So this is just a letter of support from our board asking for his
Do you
assistance.
need a
to-
motion for this?
Sure.
They've really worked hard on that through the
Yeah, they have.
MRBA too. Do you know what they're kinda talking about down there? In other
That
words,
I'm not aware of.
I kinda, well, what it is Northern Boulevard being right next to the ocean.
Yep.
And Tracy, why don't you explain it to us so we kinda know?
Well, what I understand of it, actually, I'll probably defer to Martha.
Yeah, go ahead, Martha.
She's got most of the information, but it's just to provide, if there's a breach at the center, to provide an emergency access route for
Secondary
everyone, a
access.
secondary access
Yeah,
route
well,
for
I think
everyone
it's
to
right
be
near the water,
evacuated.
and if it really overwashed and dug a big hole with the ocean, some people couldn't get out because there's no access through to get out to the road to go across the bridge.
Do you know the
97,
roadways?
I think it was, the ocean actually breached over where
Yes.
the surf caster was, and it was pretty rough. Yeah.
So this is, I mean, this has kind of been, didn't we even identify some of this way back when we were on the planning board too? Wasn't that road?
We've been talking
I'm
about this for a
sure.
while.
Yeah.
So it's been around a long time.
A known problem, and we gotta find a solution.
Yeah.
So this is the furthest along we've come, or the closest we've come to getting some funding.
And there are some town-owned parcels that the route will follow, so.
And so this is funding to make a road or make a study, or what exactly is this funding?
Is the engineering
directed
complete? I know there was some preliminary design. It's not complete, so it would be engineering and construction.
Oh, thanks, Dan.
And that's it.
Sorry, Tracy.
That's all right.
Before we adjourn, and we have some warrants, and I know we're heading right towards adjournment, does anyone else have anything they'd like to discuss? I know we had meeting updates, but anything else on anyone's mind?
Well, Dave and I have started talking more about the sound stuff that we talked a little bit
Cool.
about
Yeah.
last week. He wrote me a long email, which I haven't had a chance to read yet, but I think doing some more discussion of that will make sense. That's the only thing that I've had a chance to work on since last Tuesday.
That's awesome. I think, I think John Lucy has already isolated some information too, right, Tracy? Do you know
He
more
has
about
a decibel reader,
it?
meter reader on order.
So they've jumped forward on some of that. They need a certain amount of that for stuff they do anyway, and hopefully it's good enough to meet all the stuff that David knows more about than certainly
the
you
rest
or
of
I
us.
do.
Yeah, it's interesting. Quite a few communities actually have a sort of a general noise ordinance, or in our case would be a bylaw, as opposed to trying to do it piecemeal. Like right now, we've got noise regs for the solar, we've got them for the wind turbines, we're talking about them for entertainment. And you may want to consider, because it's a very similar issue, you know, and different communities measure the sound levels at different places and set different standards. And, you know, I think I've pretty much made up my mind, the place to measure it is what we've already got in our other bylaws, and that's at the property boundary. Some communities actually measure it at the building where like the entertainment's taking place. Others measure it inside the home of the person complaining. But the problem with that one is that if somebody calls up the police at 11 o'clock at night complaining about loud noise, and they're already in their nightgown or pajamas, they're sure not gonna wanna have the police come into their house and start wandering around with a sound meter. So, you know, I think the way we've been going at the property boundary, cause then, you know, people can have whatever levels they want within their property, but they just can't exceed it on their neighbor's property. So I think from that point of view, but the absolute levels and stuff, they're all over the place, and we'll have to do some research, I think, before we could even make some recommendations. The other thing that's coming out is that, and it's the same thing we hear from people on the island, it seems as though the bass is really the annoying thing for most people. And this is something there's not a lot of information. You know, most of the studies of annoyance have been for airports and highways and railroads and that kind of thing. There's been very little work that I've been able to find on sort of trying to establish what levels are annoying for things like music. But since I teach this kind of stuff and I've never gotten into this particular area, I'm sort of doing dual work here, both for my BU position as well as my selectmen's position. So a lot of model bylaws and ordinances and stuff out there, but they're all over the place, and we'll have to figure out what makes sense for Newbury. But it'll take a little while, I think. At least if the police have the sound measuring equipment, that's a good start.
Dave, how can we, and I suppose once you enact a bylaw, and it has to do with sound, then it's gonna be sound as an entity of sound, but I mean, it could, you know what my concern has always been, that, I mean, if you measured my lawnmower maybe at the boundary, I wouldn't be able to mow my lawn.
But that's, you specifically address that in the bylaw. In other words, the bylaw will only apply to certain things. I mean, this is something that comes up all the time, the lawnmowers. Some
Chainsaws.
communities have leaf blower ordinances.
Yep.
You know, and I think we wanna take sort of baby steps here and not regulate every single,
Yeah, a lot of-
especially with a semi-rural community, we're gonna have chainsaws.
Some communities address traffic also with like no jake brake. That's the loudest noise of all, including over motorcycles. I was astounded to hear that, but jake brakes.
Sometimes it's a good thing when you hear that.
But yeah, I'd,
Concede the point.
the chief had asked for more clarity on some of the sound issues, because I'd spoken with him about Pine Island. There's a dispute between some neighbors over a dock, and he said, "What are you guys doing about the beachcomber? You know, when my guys go out there, it's entirely subjective, and they'd rather have something definitive. It's like, this is the number. If you're below it, it's fine, and if you're above it, I tell you to be quiet." And he said, you know,
Until
what's
there's a
happening
complaint.
right now is, you know, if the officer is harder of hearing, there's no problem. Or if he's in a good mood
No,
and they're
some
playing good music, no problem.
Some communities I've come across literally have it that if it's audible on the neighbor's property, then that's illegal. And I'm thinking, whoa, you know,
Wow.
what's audible? You know, some of us have better hearing than others, as you know, it's pointed out. And So I think just from a legal point of view, having a number that one can measure, you know, with a certified meter is a good thing. And it's the same problem, you know, it's motorcycles with straight pipes or whatever. We've got a lot of different kinds of noise sources that various communities, not only ours, but surrounding ones, Newburyport certainly had a lot of trouble with motorcycles
Yep.
for a while. So I think, you know, we want to move in that direction where there's some number, an officer, you know, these meters aren't that hard to use, so I think we could train all our officers. You know, some communities actually have a community noise officer whose job is to
Oh, boy.
to regulate noise, and I thought, well, the town this size, we're not quite ready for that sort of thing.
David, when you, and I know you have probably an idea of it, when you looked at, like, Mass General Law, if there is
No,
there is no standard sound that's too loud at the boundary?
in Mass General Law, noise comes under the Massachusetts Clean Air Act. And then it's,
So it
below
goes-
that, there are regulations, but they just say you can't make excessive noise. And then at a legal level below that, there are guidelines. And the guidelines are, and these are strictly for fixed machinery, that you can't be more than 10 dB above the ambient noise level, which is what we have in our solar bylaw. And the thing is, you get that low down, the legal standing gets weaker and weaker as you get further and further away from the actual legislation. So we're, you know, at least with regulations, you have to go through public hearings, where with guidelines, you know, as far as I know, some people in an office somewhere make up the guidelines. And so we definitely want to have it in our bylaw. And again, it only really reflects fixed machinery. It doesn't address entertainment, you know, for example.
That's interesting. Wow.
Yeah.
I just don't want to be on the Board of Selectmen that outlaws the lawnmowers and the chainsaws and the
Yeah.
people's use for.
And the other thing is that there's a lot of different kinds of measurements you can make. And I think, again, we want to start simple, see how it works.
Yep.
Because the
And
more
maybe-
complex the measurement, the more expensive the meter you have to buy and all that kind of, the more training you need for your people that are using the equipment and stuff like that.
And
So,
probably address where the complaints are.
Yeah.
Music seems to last a long time sometimes, so. All right,
Mr. Chairman, motion to adjourn.
Second.
any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.